If you're planning on playing Football Manager 26, I've got some good news and some bad news. The bad news, of course, is that you've got to deal with this user interface. I mean, maybe they'll eventually fix the bugs, maybe. But the good news is that the game seems to be almost identical to Football Manager 2024. And that means that all of the old tricks will still work. Now, you probably know that there are reports all over social media talking about how the match engine has supposedly been completely overhauled, or how about this strategy no longer works anymore, or that thing that worked no longer works, or whatever. Don't believe it, don't believe the hype. These people say these things every single year, and yet nothing has ever changed. Things are pretty much the same as they've always been, and as they've been in Football Manager since like 2010 or something like that. Let's start off with a tactical metagame. Every new Football Manager game brings renewed hope that the era of Gegenpress is over. But that doesn't seem to be the case with Football Manager 26. In fact, the early indications from the forums are that the 4-2-3-1 Gegenpress is still generally the most powerful approach in the game. And once again, it seems that the key to victory is intense pressing, high tempo, and having wide players. So I've been saying for years now that it would be really nice for Football Manager to have an actual tactical metagame. You know, something like how it is with Magic the Gathering, where one color will sometimes be able to outweigh another color or cancel something out or something like that. It would be really nice if you'd have one tactical style that could cancel out what another tactical style is trying to do. Instead, Football Manager is still a Gegenpress wins all game. Sadly, I doubt that this will end anytime soon. But of course, you're probably wondering a little bit about all of the in possession and out of possession hype, right? It's too early to tell for sure, but most of the meta tactics that do well in testing tend to include similar shapes both in and out of possession, like this Knap tactic from the official forums. Of course, some old tricks work, like this strikerless formation, and notice that the midfielders play higher up in attack and a little bit lower back when defending. And like I said, the 4-2-3-1 still seems to maintain a powerful position in the world of Football Manager 26 tactics. I know that these are all extreme tactics designed to take advantage of flaws in the game engine, but it's still disheartening to see that the right answer involves holding pretty much the same shape both in and out of possession. So in other words, in the early going, it really looks like nothing has changed that much in FM26. So remember that when we were coming into this game, everybody was making a really big deal about the in-possession tactics and the out-of-possession tactics, right? I don't think that there's much surprise that the people who are complaining about how tactical instructions don't work are the same people who were experimenting a lot with having different in-possession and out-of-possession tactics. Now, it seems that training is also just about the same as it always was. As you may or may not know, FM26 does not include a resource archiver. However, we can still use the FM24 resource archiver to look at the few FMF files that still exist in the game. This includes the training.fmf file in the game simulation directory. And interestingly enough, the training files are exactly the same as they were in FM24. There has not been any changes. And of course, that means that all of the good old tricks are going to work. And those tricks are really important to understand because it seems that the way that attributes work in Football Manager also has not changed. I'll explain why. The secret to Football Manager 24 is to maximize the acceleration and pace ratings of your players. Speed is more important than anything else in the game, and it's honestly been that way for decades. Football Manager 26 is no exception. In fact, early testing of FM26 by a Chinese member of FM Arena indicates that both acceleration and pace are still overwhelmingly powerful attributes. Now, I don't really want to go too deep into that person's findings because the issue is that the testing was not really set up exactly right. There's a lot of issues with confounding variables and things like that. It is clear, though, from the initial results that pace and acceleration remain hugely important, as they've been for at least the last 5 years, and honestly, as they've probably been going back to the very first Championship Manager game. You should keep that in mind when it comes to buying players and selling players, and also coming up with a strategy for developing players. And, of course, that brings us back to the training system. Now, the way that training is represented in the user interface is bad. But this is Football Manager 26. We expect that everything in this user interface is going to be bad. Because training is exactly the same, the old trick of having players simply rest all the time still works. At least that's what I've been doing in my save. Note, however, that you are no longer able to change training for your youth or reserve teams for some really stupid reason. And although this was reported as a bug, it seems that Sports Interactive is not interested in fixing it. Now, it's not necessarily the end of the world. The trick to increasing pace and acceleration still works. And if you're worried about your young players not training correctly when they're on the youth team, there's an easy way around it. Just stick them on the senior squad and then allow them to be registered for the youth squad. Anyway, to get this to work, you'll need to set individual training to quickness for all of your players. Also, set up your rest with double intensity for the 2 most full hearts and to no gym work for everything else. The reason you want to do this is because you'll receive a boost from your rest training sessions, which will help you overcome fatigue and avoid possible injuries. Now, if you want, there is an alternative training schedule you can use. This has 1 quickness session and 1 attacking session every week, and then everything else being either rest or recovery. Personally, I still prefer the all-rest training schedule, but that's mostly because I'm just lazy. I don't want to change things from week to week. I'm also not really all that convinced that attributes like dribbling really do anything. Anyway, there are a couple of other exploits in this game that you can still check out if you want. There are also some reports that set-piece attributes and players don't really mean anything and that you can safely ignore them. And as well, the jadedness in a player doesn't really matter, but you do want to make sure that your players are match fit before you play them. Speaking of which, you should also know that there are things in this game that simply don't matter, even though the game tries to make you feel like they really do matter. And yeah, I'm talking about morale. It's extremely common in FM26 to see your best players poached away by teams in Saudi Arabia. This was also a major problem in FM24, and it's one reason why you should always pay attention to the editor data files that are out there. Keep in mind, however, that we know through extensive testing that morale doesn't really have much of an impact on match performance. The same goes for things like team cohesion. This is the stuff that people always worry about when it comes to these unusual approaches to training. When it comes to optimizing how you approach the game, the rewards for prioritizing pace and acceleration outweigh the potential downsides by a huge margin. And of course, you don't have to follow any of this advice. I mean, you can play the game however you want. Keep in mind, though, that really annoying things that get on your nerves in the game, like the morale system, the complexities of the training system as written, and so on, are mostly there for show. Speed is what really matters in Football Manager, and just like in FM24, improving the speed of your players in FM26 means having your players meditate intensely on the concept of playing quickly while they do absolutely nothing for training. Anyway, there are some tips here to help you with your FM26 experience. Now personally, I'm still concerned about this awful user interface and I find the game mostly unfulfilling. However, the in-match experience is pretty nice for the most part, though I will admit this is because the game doesn't crash on my machine. And I'm very much committed in the long run to getting at least one big FM26 save under my belt. Anyway, there you have it. Now, personally, I'm starting to believe that we really should let the people who enjoy FM26 really enjoy it. Now, the rest of us who are really frustrated with the stupid user interface and all the millions of bugs, we can let them go ahead and play that game while we go back to earlier versions of the game, that actually work. Either way, though, your approach to playing the game should remain about the same, since the game is basically identical under the hood.